Welcome, everybody, to Broadcast Team Alpha, where we bring you cutting edge conversation while exploring the quantum possibilities. And we're going to do that again tonight with our amazing guest. But I just want to invite you to connect with us. You can connect with us at broadcastteamalpha.com. You can connect with us at the Mastermind Connection at gmail.com. What the heck is that, Nori? The Mastermind Connection is a meeting of incredible minds and souls that happens every Sunday at 2 o'clock Eastern, and we come together and agree in the beginning of the meeting what we're going to put our thought energy toward. So, you may want to consider it creation or manifestation, but we take our thoughts and we unify them in a single direction, and usually those directions are very humanitarian, weather patterns, calamities, easing tension during the elections, lots of things like that, and then personal things, abundance, personal abundance, not necessarily money, right? Abundance can be health and well-being and all of those other things that you love, and we go out into the quantum field and we impregnate, if you will, the quantum field with our beautiful, loving, directed thoughts, and then we wait for amazing things to happen. So you can join us on Sunday. Send an email to the don't forget that, the mastermind connection at gmail.com. Thank you for the lively chat. I'm going to be in the chat room again with you tonight. Thank you for the super chats, and just thank you for being here with us. We just love you guys so much. So, Augie, will you tell us about our amazing guest?
Oh, yes, this is going to be wonderful. We have a gentleman with us that I think probably most of you know. But for those three of you out there that don't already know him, I'm going to talk to you for just a moment here because we have Brooks Agnew with us. We have an incredible guest here that he is a master engineer, 7-time Amazon best-selling author, host of America Free Radio, also a world-renowned public speaker. He's a mentor. And between his own radio shows and wherever he's been a guest on other shows, he has done thousands of radio shows, TV shows, documentaries, and lectures. So listen really close tonight because what you're going to hear is going to be so far out of the box, I know you can't see it anymore. And he has actually 11 books in print. He's written 20,000 pages of articles and prints, and not necessarily counting the books. And he has worked with Fortune 500 companies to create over 10,000 jobs. And I found something on his website that I just want to mention because this is something that applies to all of us. He wrote, for the first years of your life, you do what you had to. And now it's time to do what you dream to do. It's kind of like, the first third of our life, we do what we have to do. We get the job and we do all these things that everybody expects on us. But for the next 2/3, we should do what makes our heart sing and what we really love to do. And so few people get to do that because they're all tied up in the first third. Now, get outside of the box, and that's where the magic happens. And also, another thing is that when it comes to manifestation, Brooks has a course on his website, the Agnew Manifestation Masterclass. And for those of you that have not been to his website, you really need to. I got into that one and it was right up my alley. So I'm going to quit talking here because we want to hear from Brooks. Welcome to the show, Brooks.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here. Finally get to meet you in person.
Yeah, we've known about each other for quite a while. We just never got to meet before.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm I'm blown away by all of your books. I want to talk about all of them, but to start, could I know we won't. We'll talk about your favorites, I think. Can we just maybe open with remembering the future? That's so intriguing to me.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I this was 2005 or so. We had published a couple of the books in the Arc of Millions of Years series, which was a study of 44 ancient cultures and how they viewed their relationship with the planet Earth. And after 2,000 pages, we determined that all these cultures believed we had a kind of symbiotic relationship with the Earth. It was leading us toward this 2012 date, and then everything was going to end, or something was going to change. Something was going to be cataclysmic in any case. And I was kind of low about that, so I decided to go into meditation in 2005 and put myself out there to the year 2015, 10 years in the future. Let's see what's going on in the world. And when I opened my eyes, everything was upside down. The weather was screwed up. The economy was upside down. The presidency was collapsing. It was like, I don't think we're going to make it. And so I came out of meditation. I was kind of depressed about it, and I didn't want to be. So I decided to try to see if I could do something to avert that disaster in 2015. So as I started my study, and at the time I was teaching college algebra, and I came across the section that teaches about the Fibonacci. You know, Leonardo da Piso, the old philosopher that discovered this rate of increase that leads us to the golden mean. And in physics, the golden mean is pretty important because it's kind of a frequency of resonance. It's where things begin to build on one another, and tiny bits of energy can become very powerful because they're cyclic. And I was going to teach that section, but I had a lot of adults in my class that semester, and I thought, I'll teach this and they'll answer the 2 questions on the test and they'll never think about it again. So I said, I need to do something with this section to bring it alive. So I got out my calculator and I said, what happens if we don't start with 0? Everybody starts with 0, and plus 1 is 1, and then 1 plus 1 is 2, et cetera. And you get out to about 34 and 55, and you're on the golden mean, and you stay there forever, this increase. So I said, what happens if we don't start there? What happens if we start somewhere else? So I picked 2 numbers. In the book, I picked number 75 and 216. One's odd, one's even. They're not related to one another. They're not divisible into one another. So I added them together to get the 3rd number, which is 291. And I said, okay, we've started our Fibonacci sequence now. We have our first 3 numbers. We'll take the 2nd plus the 3rd to get the 4th, et cetera, et cetera. And by the time I got to 8 iterations, I divided the 7th into the 8th, and it was 1.618 to 1. It was the golden mean again.
Really?
I said, how can that be? I started with 2 random numbers. It doesn't make any sense to me. I thought, I'll go buy a lottery ticket. This is the day.
Right.
But then I tried decimals and fractions, and I tried linear equations and imaginary numbers and irrational numbers, even functions. And it worked. Every single time. By the time I got to the 8th iteration, divide the 7th into the 8th, and I got the golden mean.
Wow.
Well, I said, if this works with numbers, any value numbers, it's got to work with energy. It has to work with energy. So if I take 2 values of energy and add them together to get a 3rd, and then begin with the 3rd and add a 4th to get the 5th, et cetera, by the time I get to the 8th edition, we've got to be on the golden mean. So I started to put it into practice. And I used my meditation to listen to the very subtle changes in the universe that I was making. And I would follow those vibrations each day. And by the time I got to 8 iterations, I was in this like magical zone. And I thought, well, it can't just be me. Maybe I'm tainting the experiment. So I went and interviewed some people. I interviewed professional real estate salesmen, because, we don't all start out as a pro. You start out listing properties, and maybe you sell one house, and then 2 months later you sell another one. But I asked them, how many houses was it that you sold that you got and you said, you know what? I can do this. I can quit my day job. I can sell houses. I know how to do this. It was 8. And
Wow.
the same with professional baseball players, professional golfers. I went, I am on to something. So I started to write Remembering the Future, the physics of the soul and time travel. And I taught
Nice.
people how to meditate, how to listen to the subtle changes they're making in the universe and add to them each day. And these future dreams that they would create, sometimes 2-3 years in the future, would come to pass exactly as they had planned. Same color, same size, everything.
Wow.
Hmm.
And I don't know if this question is appropriate or if the answer is too big. What are the subtle changes that we're making in the universe during meditation? I've never heard that. That's fascinating.
Well, this is good because when you create a dream, it needs to be as complete as it can be, not just like, I want a house or
Right.
I want to be a teacher. It needs a lot more detail than that. The color, the size, the number of rooms. Is it 2-story, 1-story? What kind of kitchen countertops? Every detail you can come up with, because all of that creates a what I call a bell. You go into the future and you ring this bell. Well, one of the things we know in physics, because we study this both with light and with sound and with gravitational waves, is that when a signal is generated in space, it goes out through all time and eternity, that vibration. And things that resonate with that vibration will begin sympathetically resonating with it, all the way back to the past, which is the present that you're sitting in now. Now, I used to do this a different way. I was taught, time management and business management. I grew up in the Fortune 500, so I got all those professional training courses. And you know what? They didn't work. You make a
Yep.
plan, you set a date, and then you do what they call a but first list. But first you do this, but first you do this, but first you do this. And you work it all the way back to where you are now. And then you follow that plan and you're supposed to get your result. Doesn't work. There were books written where you could take a magazine with pictures in it and you could cut a page out in it and stick it on your refrigerator with some magnets and look at it every time you went for a bologna sandwich. And besides getting fat, you never got your dream. It just didn't work. Banging the bell over and over and over again doesn't work. What you
I
have to
used to do that.
you got to listen for the little things that are changing around you. I'll give you a good
I
example.
love that.
I had a small business idea I wanted to do here in Charlotte, and I had a certain investor that I knew would resonate with this. So I tried to get an appointment with him. I tried every way I could think of. I called the secretary. I went to his office. I wrote him letters, emails, texted him. Nothing worked. I figured the guy's just not interested. He's just avoiding me. So I gave up on it. Instead, I went surfing that night and Meetup came up in my email. You know what Meetup is, right? You can go do these things with other like-minded people. And this
Yes.
Meetup came up to go paint, paint pictures. And I thought, well, I haven't done that in a while. That's a good release. I think I'm going to do that. So I got my paints together and my easel together and I drove across town. I got there about 6:30, a little bit before everybody else, set my easel up, put my canvas up there and spread my paints out, opened my bottle of wine. I was just going to be me, just me and my painting. And I was putting the backwash on, and all of a sudden there was a tap on my shoulder. And I looked up and it was the investor. It was Brian.
Wow.
And he said, Brooks, what are you doing here? I said, Brian, what are you doing here? Well, he sat up next to me. We painted pictures and talked all night. He invested in my project and off it went.
I love
So I
that.
said, that's the little changes that you make. These
Yeah.
things you don't think have anything to do with nothing. Meetups, emails, text messages, voicemails, road signs that you see. Hey, I've never been there before. All of a sudden start resonating with your dream. And you don't know why. You couldn't have planned it in a million years, but the universe does. The
Yeah.
physics resonates with the soul.
Yes.
That's incredible, because it looks like, wow, that was a good coincidence, but maybe it wasn't.
We make the coincidences with this energy. I was watching a a Mythbusters program one time. I used to be fascinated with that program. And I can't find this recording anywhere, but I remember the program. They had a couple of jack stands set up about 20 feet apart, and they had a 2-inch piece of square steel tubing sitting on the jack stands. And in the middle, they had this tiny little resonating piston, an air operated piston, weighed about maybe 6 ounces or something. What are you going to do to a 2-inch square piece of tubing with 6 ounces? Like nothing. But he tuned it to where it would go up and down at exactly the resonant frequency of that square tubing. And within about 45 seconds, that thing was wiggling up and down like you were playing a guitar string.
Wow.
Just because that little piston was hitting that steel at exactly the right moment over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back to, who was it? Dr. Thomas Young, goes back in the 19th century. He was fascinated with human cadavers, specifically the human eye. And he was fascinated with the way the human eye focused colors on the cornea. And what he discovered was that there were constructive and destructive waves because light was operating like a wave, not like a particle. So he developed what he calls the double slit experiment. And we've seen it a gazillion times.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's you have a clean pond of water, no breeze, and you drop 2 pebbles side by side into the pond, and they make 2 sets of waves. And the waves propagate out over the water, and as they do, they expand, and they expand to where they crash into one another. And when the waves crash peak to peak, they double in height. Where they crash peak to valley, they cancel out. So what you end up with in the pond are these interference patterns where you have no waves and double high waves. And that's how energy interacts in the universe when it's resonating.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you have to be in a state to say yes, right? To say yes to that email, to say yes to that meetup, you know?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and
You can't be all loud and conscious and stuff.
right.
You have to go into meditation and listen, because these are very small voices.
Exactly.
And then you need to follow them. And what'll happen is, even if that doesn't pan out, it makes a sound, and it goes throughout all time and eternity. And eventually it resonates your dream into reality in the future, which you will eventually arrive at.
I'm
Another
putting this
thought that
book in the cart right now. Go ahead, Augie. Sorry. Thank
another
you,
thought that
Margaret, for
comes.
your super chat. Sorry, we just got a super chat. I want to say thank you.
Oh, thank
Thank you,
you.
Margaret. Love you, Marg. Okay, sorry, Augie.
Okay, yeah. Another thought that comes to mind when you talk about you just might look like you're there by accident, but maybe there's a plan behind it. What about that? Do we come here with a master plan or a mission or a reason to be here to create something that will further the growth of our soul? Or do we just come here to go to work in the morning, have lunch, come home, have dinner again, fall on the couch and just have sex on the weekend, and then go to a movie once a week? And what is the mission that we come here for?
That's a good question. And I try to answer it in the book this way, that we are eternal beings having a mortal experience. And by the time we learn to rationalize for ourselves, which is about age 9 or 10 or 11, sometimes 29 or whatever, but by the time we learn to rationalize for ourselves, we've pretty much forgotten who we are. So I discuss 3 different kinds of memory that come with this biological transducer, this very special instrument that we have on this planet. We have a star memory, and the star memory is all matter that's built by stars is entangled with one another. And as our physical bodies are built during the fetal stage and early stage of our life, the matter that's used to build this body comes from that star arrangement, wherever we are. So if we're born in May, it could mean that we were gestated in October or September. But the whole time we were in the womb, matter was being used to build our physical body. And that matter was influenced by the stars that were in that particular alignment in this particular part of the precession. So that's our star memory. We have a light memory that comes forward, and that comes from our eternal nature. Many, many lifetimes of experience. We may have been musicians for hundreds of thousands of years, warriors, mathematicians. In fact, I read a book about mathematicians. It was 8 different biographies of mathematicians. I know you're thinking, this guy's really a nerd, but it was a very interesting book in the sense that each one of these mathematicians received whole math in dreams and visions that they had. Isaac Newton, Riemann, Chandrasekhar, Einstein, they all received visions, and they believed that they were receiving them because they had always had them over time, and they each lifetime worked on it to another iteration. That's the light memory. Then the next one is a chemical memory, and that comes through the proteins that are used to make the DNA from our parents. So our parents had physical capabilities. They could run fast, or they could hear really well, or they had perfect pitch or something. That was passed along to us as well. So in that sense, yes, there's a plan, but we are involved in the plan. There's no being in the universe that judges us, that sets everything up for us, that says, oh, you're going to be poor your whole life, or you're going to go to heaven, you're going to go to hell, you're going to heaven, you've been bad, but I know you're a good person, so you're going to heaven. See, there's nobody like that. We make our own heaven. Judgment is instantaneous. It is based upon our own energy level, and we judge ourselves. It's the only way it can be.
Yeah.
That's
a lot of people are wondering
brilliant.
about that plan, and they're trying to fit all the coincidences into it. And chances are, I think the smaller things in it, like if you dropped a spoon on the floor yesterday while you were having breakfast, I don't think necessarily that was in the master plan. But the major things, I think we just might come here with for the creative purpose out of it.
Well, there might be some influences to it. For instance, in our last life, we may have been very bad. So we're reaping the karma from that, maybe. But I still think it has to do with our own individual choice. And humans are unique in this, on this world. We're the only ones that can perceive time. And if you don't believe me, just try to teach your dog about tomorrow. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's true.
And when we perceive things, when we focus or reflect on things, we change them, including the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, this gets deep.
Wow. Wow. So, I'm sorry, Augie, go ahead. I'm so
No,
excited
go
to
ahead.
talk with him. Sorry.
Okay.
So,
Now, you mentioned also time travel. And that is one of my favorite subjects, because I've been messing around with that for quite a while, and I've had some really strange experiences. I want to hear your story.
As a physicist, we try to understand time. We realize that time goes in both directions. It's not just here and going forward. We accept the fact that there's some entropy, that if we drop the egg on the floor, there's no going back in time, putting the egg back together again. There's a certain decay to physical things. However, I realized that I had to draw this in 3D. I drew several iterations of it going back to 2007. I went back through my books to create the 3D model that's in the book. And I realized that at first I thought time was like a cone, right? That we were like at the tip of this cone, and the potential of all potentialities was in front of us. But that's not really true. Time is like a funnel. The small end of the funnel is our past. It's not exactly a straight line of, one dimension or two dimensions. It's It's got some room for latitude, but it is what it is as far as our history, but the way that we accept it, the way that we perceive it can be changed. A lot of times people in their lives will write what we call scripts for themselves. And they'll say, I'm never going to do that again. But they do over and over again because they write this script for themselves. And that's one of the things we teach in the manifestation. In manifestation class, people are afraid of success. They write this script for themselves. They get to this certain spot every time, and then they go back and start over again. And they're mad about it, but we help them undo those reflective services or those scripts so they can move through it. And it's a new territory. It's like learning to walk all over again. But then the immediate future is sort of the small neck of the funnel. It's not really wide. It's kind of narrowed because of the choices that we've made up to this point. We, decided to get married before we got out of college. We decided to not go to college. We decided to, things that we did in the past will offer constraints for our immediate future. But after that, everything's wide open. All we really have to do is come to terms with the reality that we are 100% in charge of our own life condition. Yep. Now, that is a very bad epiphany for a lot of people because people don't want to admit that. Mm-hmm. Some people believe that life is 100% fate, that you're just living it out like a script, like it's already written by some supernatural being, and you're just going to live until you die. Some people believe about 25% of their life is in their control and 75% is in control of someone else. Some people are 50-50. I think most people are in the 75-25. I'm 75% in control, but 25% of it, I have no idea why it happens. The only one that really matters are the 100-0. I am 100% in charge of my own life condition. Everything that I am right now, that I have right now, is due to my efforts. And that's when reality kicks in. That's when they say, it's time to change. I'm going to change my relationship. I'm going to change my job. I'm going to change my education. I'm going to downsize everything and start over again. It is an enormous epiphany and change for people. And that time travel, that ability for us to be able to, because we don't get a chance to live this life over and over and over again, right? I used to tell my kids when they say, oh, Dad, I got this interview coming up or this exam coming up and I just don't know. And I would say, well, look, why don't you put yourself 2 or 3 days out in the future and then look back at it? Because hindsight's 20/20. How many times have you come out of a meeting and said, oh man, I wish I would have said that in that meeting. That would have been golden. Do that. Go in the future after the meeting and look back at it. Yeah. And you'll see all these things. And then what will happen is when that moment comes up in the meeting, you can say exactly the right thing because you've already been through it once.
I love
that goes right along with the Chinese proverb that says, it is your universe. You have all the right to change it.
Yeah. And a lot of people think, the goal to life is to fill up your garage with toys and have a big 401k. But I know people that have that and they're not happy. I think that it's more like a path. Once you step on the path, you are immediately reaping the joy of being on that path. The path is the goal. And if I ask people sometimes, if I gave you $1 million right now, I have it. If I gave you $1 million right now, would you accept it? And everybody says, well, yeah, I got plans for that $1 million. You bet. Absolutely. But there's one condition. Tomorrow you die. If you accept the $1 million, you get it for the day, but tomorrow you die. Every single person says, well, keep your $1 million. Then I say, wait a minute. You're telling me you would give up $1 million for one more day of life? Yeah. then why don't you treat your life like that?
That's powerful.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
powerful. And I love what you said before about the subtle changes work also on the past, right? So classic Abraham Hicks, right? Manifesting is to re-script your life, and tell a new story about the way that your life was. And I practiced that for so many years and did it, that when you meet new people and those people want to hear about the bad things that happened to you in your life, the divorce or the job loss, whatever, the bankruptcy, um, then you're bringing that story back into play, right? You're
Oh yeah.
recreating that story. Yeah, those are not my people anymore. If they want to talk about the bad
Yeah.
stuff, they're not my people.
That's like
But that's
crabgrass. Every few inches it roots again. Yeah, we don't want that.
exactly.
See, in physics, we study things like wormholes and cuts in space-time so that you can move incredible distances in a very short amount of effort. And one of the things mathematically we realize, we call it the billiard ball experiment. If you were facing a wormhole and you threw the billiard ball through the hole and someone caught it on the other end, and then they threw it back, theoretically, the billiard ball would arrive before you threw it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the
That
power you have over
that's
time.
amazing.
And in
That's
fact, we
amazing. Now,
see
is
the
that in the
effect.
Remembering the Future book? Excuse me, may I finish? Is that in the Remembering Your Future book?
Yes. And one of the things
Thank you.
that's unique about this is I was interviewing a friend of mine named Dr. Ed Close. He wrote this book called Transcendental Physics, which is just phenomenal. But we were talking about it, and he was talking about how photons don't have a pathway through space. And I said, Ed, if I go outside and I look up at the star Arcturus, sometimes I'm pretty fascinated that Arcturus is up there blazing away. All these photons are blasting out into space, and some of them are traveling 8 some odd light years to get to Earth, missing everything and making it to my eye so I can see it. He said, well, that's your perspective. But from the photon's perspective, there's no distance, because in space, what happens at the speed of light is distance becomes zero. I said, well, technically speaking, mass becomes infinity, which means that at the speed of light, the Big Bang never happened. The whole universe is still the singularity. All things, everything is local from the photon's point of view. Mm-hmm. And that's what our ability is. We're as fast as the photon. I remember it was 1997. Sir Roger Penrose wrote that consciousness was the result of quantum gravity. And it took 10 years of writing back and forth, but I finally penned back. Actually, quantum gravity is the result of consciousness.
Yeah.
And Stephen Hawking, when he was alive, had this theory that he published, which was quite controversial, but that is that when a photon gets close to the event horizon of a black hole, it will clone itself and the clone will fall into the black hole. So essentially, our universe is leaking into another universe through black holes. I said, but Stephen, if that's true, that means that other universes are leaking into our universe through black holes. We're exchanging information between universes.
Yeah,
we have a guess.
And that is a fact.
And if you look back about 1997 or so, when they did the twin photon experiment in Geneva, Switzerland, and they took a photon, split it in half, and ran it 7 miles that way and the other half 7 miles that way. And then they excited one of them and the other one had the same results of that excitement at the exact same time, which they used atomic clocks to. So there were no difference in time. That proves that they are one.
Yes.
Still.
Yes. The Alistair experiment. And it was actually a beryllium ion that they split in half. And they took half of it 11 kilometers away. Now, there's a principle in atomic physics known as the Pauli exclusion principle, like Peter, Paul, and Mary Paul, not like Polly want a cracker. And it says that all the particles in an ion, all the particles have to equal out to zero. They got to balance out, plus a half, minus a half, plus a half, minus a half. Splitting the ion and then electromagnetically flipping one of the particles over here causes a particle over here to flip to balance the equation. Yep. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. And every PChem student, if you go on into a PhD in physics, you're going to end up doing that experiment or reading about it. It's fascinating. We do not know why it does it. We just know that it does it.
Wow.
It's probably because they are still, they're separated physically, but energetically they are still one.
Well, that's what I was saying about the star memory, that I believe that matter that's created by the same star is energetically entangled with itself. So basically all the matter that's here on Earth hopefully came from the sun. It's all entangled. And that's why everything we do will eventually affect the universe.
Yeah, and we see effects of this from time to time. And in fact, I had one effect today. I was sitting here working, and I looked over to the phone, and I was just about to reach for it and call Nori, and the phone rang. It was her.
Oh, yeah.
We are connected.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're connected. And that means that if we project negativity and pain and fear in the world, it affects the world.
Yes.
I think mathematically, the universe really is the sum of all the sentient beings in it. And I don't know how many sentient beings there are in this universe, a lot, maybe trillions. But there's an average reality that we all experience. But then there's an individual reality. And I'll give you an example. If we went to a soccer game, a live soccer game, we walked through the stadium seats and out, we could see the grass. The first thing we would say is, wow, that grass is really green. And we'd agree that it's green. But really, the green you see and the green I see, they're slightly different. There's just an average green that we agree upon. And in order to get the average reality to shift, more light, more dark, it takes a massive amount of energy to move a population that size. And that energy can come in one of two ways. Either one really powerful soul, like a Jesus or some magnificent being, comes into the population, or a whole lot of people having the same idea can move the average reality. And the dark side knows this principle very well, and they use it all the time. That's why they control all media. They bombard you with their vision of the future, and they need our energy. In the book, I call it glory. They need our glory. Glory is a very special energy. A lot of people don't understand it. They need our glory to resonate with their idea, to manifest their idea of the future. Yes. And we need to stop giving it to them.
Absolutely.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
How do you define soul?
Soul is actually a combination of a physical transducer, this biological transducer, and the animated spirit within. The animated spirit is eternal. My brother was chairman of physiology at Johns Hopkins studying the human genome, and they had just gotten done with a big program studying primate genomes. So they had a good idea of what they were doing. They had some hypotheses, which were all proven wrong. One was humans are, of course, much more complex than primates, so we're going to have way more gene pairs. But we didn't. We had less, in fact, about half. So they had to realize that these gene pairs actually have a choice of proteins that they can make, and that choice is influenced by the environment. So they started studying twins, identical twins, thousands of sets of twins. And they found that at birth, they were genetically identical. But as life went on, they diverged. The physical appearance diverged. And they said, how can that be? They're eating the same food. They're exposed to the same amount of sunlight, same toxins, same family stress, same amount of wealth. How can they change like that? And they realized it's the person, it's the spirit within that's influencing the gene pairs to make the proteins that they make. And that's why consciousness was added to the four main forces of the universe. We have gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak molecular forces. We added gravity. And recently, gravity was moved to number one as the main causative. Consciousness was moved as the main causative force in the universe.
Yay. We're on the right track.
Do you see a difference in definition of spirit and soul?
Well, one is part of the other. I mean, you wouldn't describe a soul as a spirit. A spirit is part of a soul. We incarnate many, many times with the same spirit, but the different combinations of physical transducers that we have influence how we interpret and affect the universe in that particular shape.
Yeah, these transducers like you talked about, that's probably why we should study epigenetics.
Yes, epigenetics. Of course, we've been trying to manipulate genetics forever, and of course, they're doing it on a massive scale right now. But the point is that over time, and I mean over millions of years, we probably look very much similar from age to age, because the spirit within is creating the habits of grooming and weight and exercise and everything, because we're actually the driver within of what we look like on the outside.
We have some questions in the chat. We have some questions in the chat room. And the topic of the Akashic Records has come up a couple of times, and what you think of that? What you think about that?
Everybody doesn't agree with me on this, but I think the Akashic Records are written into only in the third dimension. And periodically, beings are called. Some of them don't choose to accept the calling. In fact, I think many are called, but few choose. Not many are called, but few are chosen. You could be chosen all day long, but if you don't choose, it ain't happening.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The point is that once that calling is accepted and the act that needs to be written into the Akashic record is done, it's in there. You would think that a savior and a resurrection would have been written many times in the Akashic record. Somehow it wasn't. And Jesus had to come here, accept the call, which he could have rejected, but he didn't. He accepted the call, he served as the Christ, and he established resurrection in the Akashic record. Each of us are writing in the Akashic record in mortal form. When we're without a body, we don't have any effect on the universe. In fact, I would maintain that being mortal is one of the most valuable, coveted gifts in the universe. It may even be heaven. Mm-hmm. Even angels will fall to be mortal.
Wow. So the theory that everything, past, present, future, is written in the Akashic records. Is that
a lot
that
is
thing that
a lot is, but not everything.
Not everything. Okay.
Some things have yet to be written, and they're written in this dimension.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. They're written in this dimension by
dimension.
virtue of what we choose, by virtue of what we choose,
and what we do. I mean, it's not just what we think; it is how we act on those thoughts.
Absolutely.
We are writing the ultimate future ourselves. It's not written for us. When the founding fathers learned to read, they probably all started with the same book, which was the Bible. It was the most widely published book in the world in that day in 1775. 56 people saw that future. We march inexorably to Armageddon and we die. And they said, we don't like that future. We're going to choose another future. We're going to establish a nation that's based upon God's laws and give everybody free will. It was never predicted in any scripture, in any record. No America, no country with our power and ability and wealth and influence was ever predicted. Those guys created it. They wrote it in 1776, and it changed the world. And I might add, the global syndicate's been trying to change it back ever since.
Yeah, and these guys, they were just kids. 21, 20 years, 22. One of them, Alexander Hamilton, was probably one of the older ones, was 23. That's amazing.
Yes, it is. But they said, let's choose another future. When God writes something in the scriptures, it's a prophecy. But people need to understand that a prophecy is a conditional prediction. Yeah. This is what's going to happen if you keep doing that. If you stop doing it, it's not going to happen. In the book, I have this comic from Delbert. I love Delbert. Delbert says, in the future, I could see that I choose the soup instead of the salad. So if I choose the salad, does that mean my memory of the future is wrong? No, it doesn't. It means you know what the future is because someone told you what it is, but you don't like it. So you made another choice.
Yeah. Yeah. That leads me to another book that you have called Alienated Nations. It talks of a new quest for liberty. And maybe we should define liberty also. Maybe as one, when government is afraid of the people, you have liberty. When the people are afraid of government, you have tyranny.
That's true. That book I wrote in 2012, it was my first #1 bestseller by far. And it talks about what's called a convention of states. Article 5 in the Constitution says, and this was put in as a in case of emergency break glass clause. As the convention was winding down, the framers realized they were about to hand a tremendous amount of power to a central government, and they already did that gig. So they said, well, let's put in a safety clause that if this government gets too big and too powerful, the states can come together and amend the Constitution and rein them in. Now, it's never happened, but we're trying to get it to happen with the Convention of States. And we have 4 areas that we're focused on that will fix what's wrong with our country right now.
We do need a fix.
Well, the 4 areas have been through, gosh, I don't know, what has it been? Almost 10 years of debate and a lot of agreement. And the 4 main areas are term limits for Congress and the Senate. There's a little bit of wiggle there as to how that's done, but term limits. The second is to repeal the 16th Amendment, which gives the government the ability to tax income, and that goes away. The government raises its money another way. The third is to define the Commerce Clause. Commerce Clause is only about 6 words in the Constitution. But because of that ambiguity, it allowed FDR to establish the agency government. All of the agencies, departments, bureaus, administrations that really write our laws, really assess our taxes and our fines and fees and take our stuff, they have federal authority as though they were a government, but we have no representation in that government. Yeah. So we're going to change that with the Commerce Clause definition. And the fourth one is probably more powerful than the other 3 put together. And that is line item veto for the president. Yeah. In the original set of constitutional guidelines, 1 bill was 1 law. Now we get 1 bill with 2,500 laws. Mm-hmm. And there may be 2,400 bad ones and 100 good ones that the president wants, so he's forced to sign it. With line item veto, he could take a black highlighter and say, nope, nope, Nope. And that's the real veto power the president's supposed to have.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well,
we have 21 states. We have 13 to go, and we can pull off the convention, and then it takes 38 states to ratify.
Yeah, whoever wrote the script to the Matrix movie, they knew something.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
A lot of people out there on the blue pill, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, what do you think, right? You know, we see spiritual people, they're trying to separate themselves from politics, and I'm actually one of them. I try not even to look at it anymore. But what do you think that you could say to the people that would be most important for them to know right now to make their life better?
Well, I would say that we have felt as though we're alone for a long time. And we have felt separated. We felt divided, our nation. And we've been divided for a long, long time, maybe 100 years. But recently, like in the last 5 years, a gathering occurred. And in fact, I think, I got this right here, as a matter of fact. What happened in the last 5 years, wrong book, is a gathering. All of the separated people began to group together. Over the last, 15 years, we've been around lecturing around the world. We've done courses and wrote books and made mini films and all that. We've created these little pockets of light all over the world.
Yeah.
And in the last 4 or 5 years, that light turned up very bright, and people were able to see other beings of light. And so we decided to group all the light together. And what happened was it put all the darkness together. And this was predicted to happen. Maybe 30 years ago, we could live our lives the way we wanted to till Saturday night. We would get up in the morning, go to church on Sunday, a little bit of rice, a little bit of wine. Everything was cool, and everything was set back the way it was. And we started over on Monday. But over time, what was predicted to happen is the line would get wider and wider and wider. And then you couldn't run to it from Saturday night to Sunday morning. You had to start like Friday night or maybe Wednesday night to get there. And now, though, that line's so wide, you have to choose. You have to choose whose side you're on. And that choice is being made right before our eyes. We can see them now for who they are.
Yeah.
And it's terrible.
Yes.
We really don't want to see it. But this is the tares being separated from the wheat. This is the prophecy that we're watching.
Yeah.
So when you say you don't like politics, politica is just the people. It's just the people's voice. Politics isn't dirty. It's necessary. It's necessary discussion to get the people's idea into society. So I wouldn't shun it. Wouldn't necessarily run for office, but the art of rhetoric, the art of describing your point of view and making your case is politics.
Yeah. We're hearing people also talking about that this is the end time. Well, is it the end time or is it a beginning of another time? I think there is something happening that's going to be something new. So maybe they're on to something about the end times of the garbage we had in the past. Or what do you think?
I think about this billboard I saw on the freeway. Just driving along, here's this billboard for a church, and it says, "Are you ready for eternity?" And I thought that for about a minute, and I said, wait a minute. Aren't we like in it already? Like, aren't we like a ways through eternity already? The point is that when they talk about the end times, that, the righteous are going to be caught up in the clouds. We're going to sit in bleachers as the wicked burn. Tell you the truth, I don't want to be in those bleachers.
No.
I don't want to see that happen. I would rather try to save as much of the world as I can. But I don't think we're nearing the end of the world. I think we're nearing the beginning of the next age. And this is where, because we have now become a global society, we're now connected together like we never have been before. Just since what, 96, which is like 2 minutes ago. Before that, we didn't have high-speed internet. There was no such thing as email or texting, or we couldn't send a picture across the world in a flash. Now we can. We're bringing the world together so we can unite as one people, not necessarily one nation, because I really am strongly a follower of decentralization of everything, no central anything, lots and lots of little ones, but not one big one. And I think that's where we're headed. That's why the United States worked so well for so long, because we had 50 states.
Yeah.
The federal government was small. Now it's become huge, and it needs to be dissolved again and fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I see we're coming down towards the end here, but let people know where they can get a hold of you, and talk a little bit about maybe some of your, I almost said favorite books. You can't say that, but some of your books. It's kind of favorite books. That means kind of like, who's my favorite child? It don't work that way either.
Or my favorite star. Yeah. Well, the easiest place is to go to brooksagnew.com. That's the easiest place. My radio station, my store, everything is there. And you can get the books off Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And by the way, if you buy the paperback or the ebook through Kindle or Nook, I will give you the audio version for free. So if you're not a good reader, don't worry about it. I read it for you. And I think it's a good deal.
Nice.
So
That's good.
I'm trying to get the Birth trilogy turned into a TV series, because I really think it can help change the world.
Wow.
Charm of Favor is a thriller. It's about the war between patriots and what I call the global syndicate. And I'm writing the sequel to that right now. It needs to be a big screen movie, but it's never going to be. Not unless I become rich. No one's ever going to fund it. But Birth trilogy would be magnificent.
Really good.
That'd be good.
Will you come back and see us again? Because
In a second.
amazing.
Absolutely.
Aw, that would be wonderful.
Oh, this
Thank
would
you
be good.
so much for being here. I'm just so my life has been made better having this conversation with you. No, sometimes you meet people and that just happens for you, and that happened for me tonight. And I've got a bunch of books in my cart already. So
Very
thank
nice.
you.
Don't forget the
Thank
audiobooks.
you.
They're great for driving.
Love it. Love
I
it.
I got
get
one.
people who say they're stuck in the parking lot waiting for the chapter to end.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. I got one more question that I just have to ask you. It is one of my favorite questions. If you could speak to the whole world and the world was listening, what would you tell them?
Oh, that's the easy one. We are not alone. You are not alone in this world. Everything we do will eventually affect the universe. So you should do it on purpose.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
That's
Thank you
exactly
so
what it
much.
says on your website.
I've kind of
In a
refined
roundabout.
it over the years.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Beautiful. Thanks to everybody in the chat room. Margaret sent us 2 super chats. Merry Christmas
Wow.
to Margaret. We love you. Yeah, Augie, you want to take us out?
Yeah, that'll be okay. And I'm looking forward to our next time. Let's give it a little bit of time. And then there were so many other things that I wanted to talk about. I know you speak intelligently on the moon and how the stars, I mean, how it all fits together in the solar system. And that's one of my favorite, and the planets and so on. And there's other things that I just want to have another conversation with you.
Absolutely. We could talk about asteroid mining and the future of energy.
Oh, yeah. That's another one. And also free energy. Actually, I don't know if there is such a thing as free energy, because it costs a little bit to put together the machine that'll create it. So it's not totally free, but there's the concept there that I think need to be discussed. So anyway, thank you very much for being with us. And then for the listeners, we'll be back next week with a wonderful show for you. And until then, take care of each other.
Thank you.